All right. We better get on with this because we've only got an hour and we've got an intriguing panel. Interestingly, Viscount Younger, who's the Parliamentary Under Secretary of State, has issued a little statement, actually, which I thought, we've printed it here. You can pick this up off the big desk outside in the atrium. But just saying, really endorsing the notion that actually this subject is fundamental to British growth, to British and global growth prospects. How to get the value from the data, how to make it work better, how to deal with privacy issues. And those will be some of the issues that our panel are going to discuss here. What I propose to do, there's a bunch of questions that, I mean, you all know why you're here. And I think rather than try and kind of scene set, I want to plunge in. I'm going to get each of them to give a kind of no more than 2-minute statement. It can be a statement. It can be you can throw open your own questions. You can say something you think is challenging. Then I want to get a discussion going between the panelists. And then a bit towards the end, I want to bring you in as an audience. So I was very struck. I was with Transport for London recently and discussing signalling on London Underground. And this, I was told, was no longer a signalling problem, but actually a big data problem. Could one get sufficient information to actually predict where trains were going to be, to kind of obviate the need, actually, for the kinds of static signalling that actually currently the Underground uses. And for me, it was I'd never considered TfL as as capable of posing questions in those terms, and I was very, very struck. But I mean, so the questions we're going to try and answer are, to what extent is that a common? To what extent can asking this question throw up solutions to business problems? Is policy as currently configured fit for purpose? Just a simple business of building the algorithms to unlock it. We've got a couple of practitioners here, and we also got Camden Council, who have got a big exercise with us at the Big Innovation Centre in actually hackathoning some interesting data sets. What's the regulatory regime? If you're standing at the back, do come down. There's a lot of spare seats at the front, and this is only going to last another 57 minutes. So if you want to head for the exit, you only have to wait for 56 minutes and 45 seconds now. So, I mean, let's... if you want to introduce yourself, I am going to start from your left and my right. So kind of first up is Daniel from Satalia. Daniel, if you want to say, in 10 seconds who you are, and then plunge into no more than 2 minutes, and I will stop you at 2 minutes. So go.
Okay, so I'm Daniel Hulme. I founded a company from a spin out from UCL in the area of algorithms and optimization a few years ago, and I am also a lecturer in UCL. I help academics and master's students understand about how to use data-driven decision making in SMEs and in their entrepreneurial activities. You asked if I had some interesting, challenging questions to throw out there, and I guess I have a challenging question, which is, what would the world look like if all data was open? If your health data was open, crime data, everything was open about you, your salaries and things like that, what would that world look like?
I have to say that the Big Innovation Centre's mission as a kind of do tank thinking about innovation is we are, all of us, committed to open innovation. And the companies and trusts and universities that sponsor us are all, to a greater or lesser degree, but all to a degree, open for that challenge. But let's go to Roger. You are
Roger Bickerstaff. I'm a partner at Bird & Bird, which is a law firm, and I'm also the chair of the Society for Computer and Law, which is the association for IT lawyers in this country. And yeah, just picking up on that question, really, you know, what if all data was open, what would it look like? And as lawyers, I suppose one of the things we're looking for, what are the parameters and what are the constraints? And in any new area, such as big data, you know, it's a developing field, and the law we've got is, you know, is law which came out in the 50s, the 60s, maybe copyright law, which was 19th century law. And one of the things that as lawyers we're struggling with is, well, what are the, you know, the appropriate constraints and parameters? And so, for example, a couple of months ago, there was a decision of the Information Commissioner, as it happens, relating to the use of monitoring in taxi cabs in Southampton. And so, well, what's that got to do with big data? Well, what they were doing was putting CCTV and sound recording into all of the taxi cabs in Southampton, and using that data in order to check if there was an incident, or was it the taxi driver, was it the passenger, whoever it was. And one of the things that came out of that decision was that it was accepted that CCTV monitoring was fine, but sound recording was regarded as being an invasion of privacy, and sound recording was disbarred. And I found that really interesting. Where does that come from? Where does that decision come from? Why is video recording fine, and sound recording is an invasion of privacy? And I think there's a lot of things coming around at the moment. I've got another example here, which I was horrified actually when I read it. It's from a colleague law firm in Switzerland. And there's apparently a legislative proposal in Switzerland to enable the Swiss government to put in state Trojans, you know, into computer systems, so that these state Trojans will be monitoring around and will actually be able to capture information which is encrypted to be encrypted before it is encrypted. And so, you know, it's amazing that the Swiss are doing this stuff or proposing. And this is just a report in a newsletter from a law firm in Switzerland, as if, yeah, this is fine, you know, just get on and do it. So, you know, the parameters, the constraints on the use of big data, I think, are really interesting. It's a policy issue as much as a legal issue. The law will follow the policy, but within Bird & Bird and within the Society of Computers and Law, we're really interested in stimulating that debate as to where the appropriate constraints and parameters should be on open data, on big data. Because, you know, quite frankly, who knows? And let's talk about it.
Well, that was very good. You did that in 2 minutes flat. Birgitte, who is saves this panel from being all male.
I'm Birgitte Andersen. I'm the director of the Big Innovation Center. And for those of you who don't know us, we are an open innovation and investment hub where our companies and partners and universities and trusts share the people, the resources, the technology, and the data, etc. So this is the way in which we're trying to co-create growth. And we have talked about legal issues and what will the future look like. To me, of course, the big thing is how big data is a general purpose technology, how it's a factor of production and a factor of organizing production, such as the labor, as physical capital, as energy, as raw materials, etc. It's actually something that can drive and boost growth in the economy. It is as an important growth engine as what we have seen historically, how the railways, electrification, steam engine, mass production and internet, the way in which that could reorganize how wealth is created in the economy, so can big data. But there's only one way in which it can do that, and that is through open innovation, and it's through much more transparency in data. So what we're really interested in, looking at how we can create corporate growth, business growth, consumer welfare, and grow the whole world economy. But of course, we are interested in exploring how how we can combine data across the whole innovation ecosystem and actually create better health services, create better green growth, create better education, etc. So these are some of the things we are interested in. And at the end, of course, what would the best business models look like? Embedded in open innovation, and what would the regulatory framework be that could be supporting that best?
2 minutes flat. Sorry, boring. Peter.
I'll try and do it in 1 minute 59 then. I'm Peter Reid, I'm a serial entrepreneur. Since 2000, I've worked in open innovation space, creating and running not-for-profit organisations that have helped businesses accelerate and adopt innovations more quickly, more successfully, often by working with academics, so I've spent some time around these hallowed walls. I was asked to join the Technology Strategy Board in May last year to spin out from the TSB an organisation called the Connected Digital Economy, Catapult, and that sounds like government industry policy, because the government wants to invest money in an independent organisation which is going to stimulate market disruption, significant growth and social well-being through connected digital economy. So it's all about data, how you connect data to each other, how you combine it, how you create new services and supports that are not incremental, but that change the way society operates and major markets operate. So that sounds like a very exciting challenge for me.
Do you want to give tangible examples?
Yes, we're shaping a number of projects. I don't want to get into too much detail, but if you look at a vertical and say, how is increased digitalisation going to change health? So I think there are two directions of travel. One is, can you get lots of data from health providers, and can you combine that in an open way which allows other people to understand where social services should be located because there are health needs, where you need different sorts of restaurants, so councils and boroughs can think about what they allow or disallow in areas, how schools manage their student population with more awareness of the health or lack of health within their specific communities. So you've got personal data going out, anonymised, creating value back into the health service, which perhaps saving billions of pounds, but also delivering services, allowing businesses to deliver services with a better understanding of the communities they're in. But also, how can you make health person-centred? I don't want my health to be centred around my GP. I want it to be centred around me. There are things I may want to know about my parents' health, if they're happy to share with me. So how can you create health data where the patient owns the data, where that data can come from multiple sources, securely, openly, honestly? I don't mean openly to the public, I mean openly to that person. And again, there are some big regulatory governance issues, big consortium building issues with health deliverers and with the public, and there are some technical issues. So it, again, fits into the sort of, those two describe part of the scope of the challenges that we're trying to tackle at the CDE with partners in the community, not as a solo activity.
Chris, Camden Council, and you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm Chris Widgery, I work for Camden Council. The reason we got involved in this was primarily we were driven by the need to find savings. Like every other local authority, we've been having to do more with less. What we also realise is that a lot of our systems are very old, a lot of them are very incomplete, they don't talk to each other very well. So we actually need to find ways of treating our information and the data we have as an asset. And some of that asset will benefit us internally, but also how can we use that to generate growth, promote business in the borough? We're still having to compete for businesses to come to Camden, and if we can use our data more intelligently, we can get more value for the taxpayer's pound. So some of the issues we are grappling with are legislative. There are others where, and I'll be interested in exploring this later today, I genuinely don't think they are legislative issues. Just as a personal example, my son has special needs. So we're engaged with lots of parts of the health service. Every time someone gives us a form saying, can we share your data, we tick it. Every time we see someone, have they shared the data? No, they haven't. So I think there are some cultural or institutional barriers which are already preventing that. We certainly experience that internally and when we're working with partners. So we do a lot with the police, with the fire brigade, with the health service, but quite often we are running up against these issues. We can see opportunities where we would like to share data, but at the moment it's difficult. So it's a slow step for us. We are doing some work with the Big Innovation Centre, with Google and some other partners, which is trying to take the information we have and see if we can join it up across our different systems. We don't really have the expertise, but if there are other people we can work with who do have the skills, who do have the insight, then that's going to let us deliver more for less, and ultimately that will let us deliver better outcomes for the people and businesses in Camden.
There are a number of people who I think looking rather uncomfortable sitting over there. There's a lot of seats here. And disadvantage is you're very near me. But, I mean, it would be more comfortable perhaps because you actually see the panellists. If you want to just do that, just come down now. Otherwise, the next 45 minutes, you're going to be getting buttock ache. If you move down, Sonia, perhaps. Okay. Just move along a little bit here. There we are. Very good. Okay. Sorry, no proceedings, but I just. Do you know, Chris, what is the problem that you're trying to solve with the collaboration? You mentioned two collaborations, one with us and another with the police. What are the problems that you hope big data will help you solve? And how would you involve, say, a company like Satalia in that? I'd be interested to get some sense of where the crossovers are here, where the new kind of formations are.
One of the specific problems which we would love to solve has already been touched on, which would be about linking up our health data with social care data. So the NHS has masses of data on individuals from GPs and their engagement with other health services. We have similar masses of data about individuals through our engagement with social services. There have been efforts to try and unite those, but so far we have been unable to. Only a relatively small percentage of the records are linked. What we really want to understand, and the long-term prize, is how can we use that information to spot who is going to fall into dependency when they get older and intervene early. That's actually a very difficult thing. I don't think anyone has quite yet worked out how to do it, but we will clearly need to find ways to link our systems to anonymise the data in such a way that whilst we are looking at individuals, no one knows who those individuals are. Because if we can, just on that one example, if we can prevent someone having to fall into the dependent state, then it will save us a fortune, it will save the NHS a fortune, but more importantly, it will dramatically enhance that individual's quality of life. So in terms of how others can help us, I think that we and probably our partners in the health service would agree that we don't have the skills, we don't have the expertise to be able to link those and do that kind of analysis at the moment.
Okay, and then finally, Tom.
Good afternoon. My name's Tom Heath. I've been working with linked and open data for the best part of a decade, so it's great to hear examples of where there are real problems that can be solved by connecting up data sets whilst ensuring that individual privacy is maintained, anonymity where appropriate. I joined the ODI, the Open Data Institute in East London at the end of January as data scientist, and I'm going to make a deliberately provocative statement, given that it's Big Data Week, that I think when it comes to policy, I'm not sure that size really matters. And I think that actually the issues which are being dealt with under the open data agenda are actually more pertinent and probably more encompassing, broader than big data itself, which in many cases is primarily a technical challenge and a fantastic technical challenge, and with great potential. But I think that the open data agenda is broader and touches on many of the issues that we need to solve. And to give some examples about why size doesn't matter, I think there are certain data sets which are really key pieces of glue that enable us to do interesting and useful things with data. They enable data sets to join up, and these might not be particularly large. They might be thesauri of terms that enable people in related areas to communicate between themselves. They might not be large in size. There might be sets of identifiers like postcodes, for example, that enable different data sets in adjacent domains to be connected through common and strong identifiers. They might not be large, but they're critical pieces of glue, critical parts of our information infrastructure as a nation and as a society. In terms of policy, I think the key thing that I routinely come up against is legal issues, like the state of the law in terms of being fit for purpose for the kind of things we want to do with data in the 21st century. And I invest a lot of time in trying to understand the legal issues that affect the work that I do, and it's very, very hard. I'm not a lawyer, but I've invested a lot of time, and I think that if the barrier is so high for someone like myself who can invest the time in doing it under the banner of the ODI because we need to know about this stuff, then the chances of an entrepreneur or an organisation being able to successfully navigate the legal space and build a successful business is the chances of that are much lower. The other policy issue I'd like to explore on the panel is around the grey area between public and private data. So there's a tendency in the discourse at the moment to talk about these things as distinct aspects. There's public data and then there's the private personal data. And I just don't think this stands up. My favourite example is the little black board above the door of your local pub, giving the name of the licensee. That's personal data. You know, you're making a connection between a person's name and a person's place of work or business, and you know, to draw this distinction between public and personal is an oversimplification. I think we need to understand that more if we're going to progress the agenda.
Roger, do you want to say, just, fill this out? Do you see is there no difference between, I may be a private individual, once my data is in the public domain, I'm suddenly a public person.
I tried to comment first, but it was something
It's quite very striking last week in the events in Boston, how, people thought they had private data on social media, social network sites, and suddenly it was all public. And you could suddenly find that for some short minutes you were a suspect in the biggest kind of murder chase in the last kind of 50 years. Speak to that.
Yeah, well, I suppose the first comment is that privacy is very much a social construct. Facebook has been making that comment for quite a few years now. It's not necessarily, as would be a continental supposition. It's not necessarily a human right in quite the same way as some other things are. And in fact, one of the sort of slightly interesting things I read about recently is that privacy was enhanced by the invention of corridors in the 17th century. In older houses, when you had to go from room to room, and before the corridor was invented, people just walked through, these big houses, and just whatever the person was doing, whether sitting on the loo or getting up to something nefarious, that just happened. And the concept of privacy is, something which actually developed alongside, the notion of a corridor. And so, this continental notion of an ingrained right of privacy, actually we do need to challenge it. Facebook has been challenging it. There are some things which are, really private and we want to keep private. And there's there's quite a lot of information which is out there. It used to be in the telephone directory, your name and your telephone number. Now we've got mobile phones, that's all disappeared. And so that Data Protection Act, the Data Protection Directive of privacy as being, sort of a holy grail, is something which, I think does need to be challenged and does need to be limited to those things which really are private.
It's actually have a share of hands.
Everything which is to do with an individual personal data is going too far.
Now you're a self-selecting audience because you all come to the Big Data Week and here you are. But who here would agree that privacy is a social contract, is a social construct, and should be challenged? And who of you thinks, on the contrary, that actually there is such a thing as privacy and and we must protect it to the last? And who's abstaining? We've got nearly as many abstentions, for and against, and a lot of people are very timid. Oh my God, can't answer these questions because somebody might know the answer. Daniel, sorry. You had the shortest speaker so far, so I think you can have.
I've still got time to burn, haven't I?
I think fairness leads you to have the next. But how do you react to what you just heard from Roger?
I think that there's a huge technical challenge when it comes to anonymity, and there are computational tools that are appearing that can really be utilised to identify people, even if you think your data is anonymous. And when you start aggregating all of this data together, it becomes more and more easier to do that. So, for example, if I ask the audience which panellist is female or who is the female panellist, you all will immediately know that it's Birgitte. Tomorrow, if I bump into
we hope so.
if I bump into somebody in the street tomorrow and say which panellist was female, they'll think I'm an idiot. But they don't have the information that you have. You've got private information, and you can pinpoint that individual. And tomorrow, when I ask somebody the same question, they don't have that information. So really, what we might think is anonymous data, when you start linking it with other stuff, it suddenly becomes not anonymous. And there's a real challenge around knowing what is and what isn't. And I don't think any individual at the moment can answer that question very, very well.
Birgitte, and then we'll come to Peter.
I think that, of course, the moral aspects of what's private and public must be compared with the economic value of it. So if by combining private data, you can actually increase economic value, then of course I think that is really what it's all about. It's not just privacy for the sake of privacy, it's actually driving growth and value. And I think that this is an important aspect, because if you only look at privacy from that perspective and actually not the value we can create, then we're not going to get very far. I think that the way forward should be finding some challenges, some real-life problems you should want to solve, such as some of the problems which was mentioned from Camden Council. How do we create more efficient use of the resources which we already have? And then and look at some examples, and through that see, where is information too private, and if we just loosen up a bit, it could create more value. I think that's the way in which policy making should be led. It should be to real challenges and solving real problem, and not some kind of academic discussion.
There's a kind of audience. Slightly, we'll bring you in. Yeah, come on. You've particularly been very keen to speak. So.
Well, not really. I just.
Let's take a microphone, actually.
Yes, Nick Trigg from STFC. The question, I think, probably about whether one is happy to have open data about oneself is probably, I would imagine there's a marked change between generations as well. The sort of younger generation is much happier, older generation is less happy, and maybe it's just a passage of time before we wait until the younger generation catch up, or grow up, as it were. But then again, I'm not sure it really matters. I think it's a policy decision that needs to be taken at the sort of supranational level, and we just.
But the audience divided. The audience divided almost 50-50 on this question. There was a slight majority in favour of the notion that privacy was a social contract, but a very significant. We've got 125 people in the room, maybe 150. I guess it would divide. 64. Let's let it rip. 50 privacy is really matters at all costs, and maybe 30 that were abstaining. So it's quite difficult for politicians to navigate their way through this. But there's a gentleman behind you, and then we'll come back to the panel.
For me, my name is Mr. Stefano Bonfa. I'm from Oxford Sustainable Development, and I think I'm going to change the title. Maybe better to call Oxford Big Data for Sustainable Development. And this will answer your question about 50-50. Depend. What do you mean by yourself big data as definition? For us, the concept of big data is value mainly. And the value is in relation with sustainable development. If this is the concept of big data and this is the concept of sustainable development, this means linking the data for sustainable development. This all the sector, they should have strategies. At the same time, they have holistic strategies. And then from there, the aim is to create jobs and economic development. In this context, I think privacy could stay by themselves. And then you use the public data that you can reach the objective.
Thank you very much. We'll come back to the panel. I want to get some sense from you guys. Just before we plunge into privacy, the economic value from this. Is this? It's so fashionable. Big data has become, the new big thing, the next new big thing. Are there tangible examples of value creation from it, do you think? I know some medical research already, but I wonder what you guys think.
Well, yes, there are many. We'll leave aside media, the way shops market and advertise, and all the value they get out of that. Let's park that as a good, however defined. Cities in Britain now are commissioning hundreds of millions of pounds of development money to test out and build cyber cities, digital cities, which will allow a range of new activities such as improved city management by having data from the environment, from traffic lights, from everywhere. You can make the energy distribution more efficient in the city, you can make transport more efficient in the city, you can personalise the experience of the citizen within the city, you can increase citizen engagement with other citizens and with the local government. So clearly there are business opportunities, there are cost savings, there's an improved quality of life in what can be aggressive, anonymous, lonely places called cities. So there are huge benefits, all driven by new sources of data, new ways of combining it, new ways of at times aggregating it, and at times not aggregating it, but personalising it. So there's an absolute start of a tidal wave of money targeting these problems. Perhaps well over £1 billion will be commissioned in the next year. I mean, we're talking about really big investments.
By cities.
Combined public-private investments in developing, deploying, testing, city-scale data systems and management of data systems. Yeah.
Tom, what kind of things have you encountered?
Yeah, can I just say, I think it's a really good summary of the economic value argument. I think there's two sides to it. One is doing things more efficiently, saving money that we've already got. And the flip side of that is using those potential efficiency gains to enable new businesses to emerge that in turn create more economic value, more economic activity within the UK. Yeah. And so the example that is my favourite is from Mastodon C, who I think you heard from in the previous session, where I don't know if Fran is still in the room.
Hi, Fran.
So this is a great example of how with a relatively modest investment, massive cost savings could be identified. That's been demonstrated for one class of drug within the NHS, and the potential to do that across other classes is immense. So I think that's a fabulous example.
The Structured Genome Consortium at Oxford consists of 9 pharmaceutical companies who come together in the Department of Medicine, organised by Professor Chaz Butra, and they're looking at the chemical construct of the 23,000 proteins that constitute the genome. And they've come together in a kind of open innovation framework because each of the drug companies knows that it's too easy to make mistakes by actually chasing the latest scientific article that might lead to a promising outcome, and they all do it and they all get nowhere. And so what you're watching, and he would characterise what he's doing as, literally about the marshalling of incredible amounts of data, and then actually kind of intersecting them with others to see if you can develop effective drugs. I mean, it's drug discovery as a big data challenge. So it's not just about management of cities or about healthcare. It's also about a business model for pharmaceutical research that we're watching. And one of the members of the Big Innovation Centre is the defence contractor BAE Systems, and BAE would argue that actually, where the defence industry is going to go over the next 20 years is absolutely about, understanding data in the sense of, who's a threat and how do you counter it. I mean, it's not. I mean, one of the things that's striking for us, the Big Innovation Centre, is that a lot of the companies that support us are, seeing big data as actually, fundamental to their emergent business model. I'm another part of my life. I'm a trustee director of the Scott Trust that owns the Observer and the Guardian, and actually the way the debate is going about how is one going to what's the business model for newspapers going to be over the next 5 years, and actually increasingly the kind of what we're beginning to think is that the answer to that exam question lies in the capacity of if you buy the Guardian, you buy a newspaper that will through it will actually manage enormous amounts of intriguing news and comment data for you and present it to you, and that's where the added value comes. That's always been, in a sense, what journalism was about, but actually you now have to and if you're going to do it that way, you actually have to do journalism differently. You have to move to open source journalism. So there's a lot of intriguing things here, I think, and I'm intrigued that £1 billion, you think, will move into investment in cities. Where's the law?
Well, the law's back in the 1950s, and that's the problem with the law is that we're still dealing with legal frameworks which certainly didn't take any recognition of big data when they put together. Big data didn't exist. Probably the digital economy didn't exist. Now that might say, well, we need to change the law. Actually, I think we do need to be a little bit cautious. that we're still at an early stage of big data. Yes, there are projects coming through which are moving into into reality. But if you were to create an inappropriate legal framework in the way that maybe the Data Protection Directive is now inappropriate in the modern world, then you're stuck with it. You're stuck with it for 25, 30 years, and that might even be worse. I know the law is difficult and complicated and hard to apply, but if you were to create, if you were to rush into a new legal framework now, then that might create even more problems. And within the English legal system, the common law system, we actually have some flexibilities to be able to develop the law on a piecemeal basis. And it actually might be better to allow the law to develop, through problems arising which then have to be sorted out through hard court cases, rather than to rush to legislation and try and do something which will then lock us into something which isn't going to work. But again, it's a debate.
Very, very British. And,
can I jump in with a quick?
Tom, I just want to. Well, okay, but then I must bring in Chris and Birgitte. Yeah, Tom.
I think I can see the appeal of that approach of kind of waiting and seeing, letting case law decide. But who's going to be the sacrificial lamb, the entrepreneur that crosses over the line and then ends up in court and becomes the test case?
But in fairness, Tom, that's been British common law, which started. So who was showing me the Surrey version of the Doomsday Book?
Big data.
There we are. This is the Doomsday Book, 1086, county by county. William the Conqueror insisted that every single hamlet tell his people what they owned and what they had. It was the first ever kind of in big data.
What was the reason for that? Tax value.
Yeah, he wanted, and so there were the Norman conquerors trying to establish a tax base, doing the first big data exercise, and the Saxons had a common law tradition which actually fought back and established certain privacy rights. And actually there'll have been some Saxon peasant, who would have been, like your entrepreneur, the sacrificial lamb. But that's how it got done in England, So, maybe that's how we're going to do it with big data.
Maybe. I just think we should be realistic about the brakes that this puts on the innovation process.
We don't take 1,000 years. You're right. Chris, then Birgitte.
So, in terms of the law, whether the law needs to change, I will leave to my learned friends to decide. I think what we are struggling with at the moment is the interpretation of the law. So, what we have sometimes are policy decisions coming from government, which are then not seen all the way through. So, the legislation may say one thing, but then there's some regulations or some guidance which don't. So one concrete example of that is the work that in Camden we call complex families, the government calls troubled families, which is really all about bringing together a number of agencies. And the DWP shared some data with us, but then wouldn't let us share that with partners. And actually, when we're working in this multi-agency way, we need to be sharing it with the police, with probation, and a range of other people. So there are examples where we run into, and frequently that's around the issue of consent. So we need consent explicitly to share data. And so, having said I would leave it to the lawyers, I do wonder if there is something about possibly switching from needing explicit consent to assuming that you already have consent. So very often I think that if someone gives their information to the council, they assume that everyone in the council has it. Well, actually that's not the case at the moment. And the way that our lawyers and other local authority lawyers are interpreting the law, it does vary widely across local government.
That's very behavioural economics of you, I must say. That's the assuming that one's in unless one declares one's out. It's a very... maybe that's the right way to go, and maybe that's the right way to go. What do you think, Birgitte?
Well, I think that I'll comment on the intellectual property right law. I think we need to understand that the purpose of the law is that it should be driving innovation and competition, and a big part of that is also to support entrepreneurship. And with respect to digital entrepreneurship, our current law has not really been very favourable. Basically, a lot of the digital entrepreneurs are those who aggregate and store data. They're those that are creating online registers, link pages, etc. These type of companies, we see some of them online, but some of them are also more like platform companies supporting other businesses to deliver their products and services and developing those. And of course, when we have a new general purpose technology, just to go back to my intro, then of course the key is that that you get new type of entrepreneurship, and we need to ensure that we have an intellectual property system in place to support that. And so far, actually, a lot of these digital entrepreneurs has been more like haunted rather than celebrated. And I speak as as an expert defense witness in several such court cases where there's been obsessed with actually, did they infringe somebody's right, even if they created a huge value for everybody else, etc. There have been this kind of celebrating the new type of business model is really, the courtroom is not where that happens, and quite often they're stopped. And quite often these cases, if we go by example that we should have cases to build the law, then of course what can happen is that you can prosecute a very small firm, a start-up, a digital entrepreneur who is just launching something new. And of course, by stopping this, then you can set an example, and then you can go after some other companies slightly bigger who seems to have made it, and they're just going to make it. And these are some of these examples we do see.
So you want a kind of intellectual property rights manifesto, do you?
Yes, I do. I think that we need some kind of IP manifesto that actually nails it. Why do we have the law, and also then build a fit for purpose system surrounding goods?
We have exemptions for research and private study in quite a lot of intellectual property rights, and maybe one of the things we should be debating is whether we have an exemption for small-scale entrepreneurship, so that we allow smaller companies, to grow in an environment where they have some protection from, the IPR claims of the very biggest companies. I mean, IPR in certainly copyright in its early stages was there, to protect the labours of individuals, authors and artists and creative people generally. And of course, what's happened over time, and this is why I say, you've got to be careful about legislating too quickly, is become something which protects the big guys. It protects the right holders. It protects the people who've bought up all those assets of the creatives. And maybe we need to create some space, to enable the entrepreneurs to come through.
I want to bring the collective intelligence of the audience in now. There's a couple of hands at the back. There's a hand here. So we can go to the back. I'll come back to you, sir. There's 3 people. I'm going to say 4 or 5 of you, and I want the panel to make notes frantically because you can reply to it. Okay, go ahead.
Caitlin Thaney from Digital Science. So having spent a significant portion of my career actually creating IP environments and also IP hacks so that people can better interact with data. Prior to this, I was working at Creative Commons, actually crafting the open data architecture so that we could get a little bit more freedom. I think that to the gentleman on the left of Birgitte, his comment about creating frameworks that actually allow a bit more space, yes, allow a little bit more space, I would encourage that because unfortunately I think that creating too many definitions and exemptions and loopholes, it actually is rather counterintuitive to open innovation because, from my experience of working with researchers, the last thing that they want to do is to have to involve a lawyer so they can understand if they can do something. But there's nothing more chilling to entrepreneurs and also researchers and the people driving the economic growth in any of our nations than having them be so confused as to what they can and cannot do that they don't play at all. So creating zones of certainty by almost getting the law out of the way, we shouldn't be using the law to make it more difficult to do things, especially because this is so important.
Just pass the mic along, actually, because there's people, a man behind you there. And then a gentleman further along, yeah.
Hi, my name's Asif Ashraf from CSL. Just on the point of personalised medicine, big data, open data, it's going to change behaviour because now, for example, there's an initiative for doctors for all your medical notes to be available to you as a patient. That means that doctors are more reticent about putting notes on records, so prompts for their own benefit. They are now going to be, I suppose, to cover their own backsides, much more reticent about what they put on those notes, and that could be a bad thing. Mm-hmm. And just to the man from Camden CCG on efficiencies and linking health and social care, is it a worry that the efficiencies will only be made in areas that are attracted to private enterprise? So managing diabetics or something is a profitable area, but managing mental health and getting multi-agency cooperation on that area, which isn't necessarily profitable to private enterprise, is Camden going to be able to see efficiency savings where you really need it?
Thank you. Then at the end there, there's a...
Hi, my name's Neil Surugi, previously Director of IT in a care trust, which was responsible for integrating health and social care records, and more recently Chair of the Independent Advisory Group overseeing GP extraction services for GP data. So I come at it from two angles, really. The first is recognising the need for data, and certainly data for research, to be made available, and also recognising the amount of consternation there is amongst professionals that the political agenda around big data will in the end obviate the obvious benefits of getting big data together and analysing it for the public benefit.
What do you mean, when you say political, you mean the privacy question?
There's the privacy question and the commercialisation question. So consequently, whether people in the panel see economic growth as the engine for change or not, many patients, many GPs and many professionals are anxious that if you lessen and weaken the rules, regulations and law around privacy and consent, and I was very worried about the potential for assuming consent rather than having informed consent, there will be a counter-reaction. And I guess my concern is that unless the culture is recognised more obviously around data, big data, privacy, patient records and the like, there will be a counter-reaction that will in the end be counterproductive to using data for research.
Thank you. There's a gentleman here who wants to say. Anyway, anyone up there? Yeah, well, I'll bring the mic down. There's a gentleman in the middle, and then we'll come to you, and then we'll get the panel to respond. And if you're burning, if anyone's got the answer to the exam question, we want to hear you.
Hi, I'm David Morgan from a company called Orgify. I'm going to introduce a sort of controversy fueled by an irony, really, and that is that I think small data is actually much less private than big data. And I think that if you use the analogy I think we're all familiar with, that if you look at village life, everyone knows each other's business, really. But when you move to London, you don't know your neighbour. And really, privacy is a sort of bit of a hooray word, a bit like freedom. It's about really the stuff I don't want people to know, because I'll get excruciatingly embarrassed about. And so the irony of it all is that in big data, I'm actually not that concerned about people knowing, that I'm part of a trend. I'm really concerned if someone sort of finds out about my mistakes that I know, and then you're talking about really big data. But so, in essence, I think we should be completely deregulative about big data and privacy, because I don't think people care as much as we think. And I think the corollary of that is then access to big data, particularly unstructured big data, gives me choice. It gives me choice about, well, actually, I know my medical records. I might want to know my parents' medical records, but it is about me and my choice. And my choice also involves, I want to know what people think and feel about that GP. I want to know what people think and feel about the quality of education in that school for my children. And I want access to that. So I think we need that. It's a bit controversial, but I think deregulation and total access to big data.
Thank you very much. For the last point here, and I'll get some panel reactions to those points before you forget them. There's always a danger when you take... just here.
Nick Tsounonis, Rexus.com. We do a lot of personalization, big data.
Get the mic a bit closer to your mouth.
Hello?
Yeah.
So we work with quite a lot of data, but what I don't know is, as a user, as a citizen, what rights do I have to my data? And I want to use that as a commodity to be able to help certain initiatives, like, say, certain health projects, why can't I just tick a box and say, here's my data, you've got it locked up somewhere. I don't even know that somebody needs to do, research projects on something. Why don't you democratize and let the data flow? Because I just think people would love to help, but they just don't know that it's locked up. So you were talking about the tick box. Why can't I go and tick the box for my council and release the data to whatever initiative you need?
Thank you. Now let's get some answers to that. Now, Roger, you were keen to say something about the law, the law as it came up.
Just picking up on those last two comments, actually, which I think are connected. And you were saying in the middle there that, well, big data, small data, big data equates to anonymity. Whereas if you're living in a village, everybody knows what everybody does in any case, and they're just walking through the rooms instead of the corridors. But that's not true anymore, and I'll respond by an anecdote on that one. In that, and I won't mention the supermarket, but somebody was telling me that they went along to a dinner party of some people who they didn't know, but there was a guy there from one of the big supermarkets, quite a senior guy in the supermarket. And halfway through this dinner party, this guy turned round, and he'd obviously been doing some research on the people who were going to that dinner party. And he told them, what brand of champagne this woman liked, because he'd been onto the loyalty scheme and was able to check out from the loyalty scheme, what their likes and dislikes were. And it's a completely inappropriate use of personal data, and that's the danger with that's the issue with big data. In that, that these days, it's so easy from these huge, great data sets, to identify the little snippets of information which are very personal, which we don't want people to know about. And so that's that when I say that privacy is a social construct, I'm not saying that there is no right of privacy, or that that privacy is not important. Actually, it is incredibly important, but we need to debate about the level of privacy for what data, so that we've got appropriate privacy for appropriate circumstances.
How do you feel about Google here? Just to pick this, I now when Google has very kindly customized my page, and I now all the sites I visit regularly are up there for me to have my own. So with one click I can get there. I thought, bloody hell, someone out there knows what I. Some of the things I read are fairly obscure. The Guardian is up there, followed by the Financial Times. And I thought, well, that's convenient, and I'm glad about that. But when I thought, I don't want them to know. Why the hell should they know? Who feels great about Google? Knowing everything about you. Who cares? Okay. You don't care. You do care. Who cares about Google knowing so much about you? Who doesn't care about Google knowing so much about you? You don't care about Google knowing so much about you.
Well, you say so much. It's all relative. I think it's very important for everyone to understand it. There needs to be a bit of education behind it, because we can discuss some very extreme examples, but actually, if people understand the value that this can actually generate, because somebody knows what champagne they drink, that means that next time they go to that supermarket, that champagne is on the shelf, because that's already information. But then to go back, I think we need to leave these examples and really get the conversation more towards how we can create some kind of education and understanding of, by combining the data, we actually can generate real value. And that also means, and this is not only about consumers, that's also for businesses. We need companies, small or large, to understand that actually, if they share their data with other companies and the public sector, they can deliver the products and services in completely new, radical, different ways, and that can generate a lot of value. That's where the discussion should be going at, not some kind of extreme examples.
Well, who cares about Camden Council knowing all about you? A lot of you care about, if you live, or your borough, just your local government. A very huge majority cared about Google. Let's try a local government, benevolent local government like Camden. Who would care about their local authority knowing all about them? Well, that's quite a fair question. Who wouldn't care? It's a trick question. No, but I think there's quite a lot of... With Google, there's baggage with it too, isn't there?
I think there's a question. If you have given your information to Camden Council, you're given it for a certain category of services. And the implied consent is that you're happy for them to share that data with other people if they're delivering you that same category of services. It's not they can use that data for other things. They can't sell it to a local sweet shop because you didn't sign up for that. But you did sign up for a range of social care and welfare services. And so why should it be trapped within just that bit of Camden Council rather than shared with their people who deliver that service direct? So it's not about totally open or totally closed. It's about appropriateness of sharing data within the context of the things you have already permitted.
So that's your answer to the gentleman there. I mean,
and just on that point, one of the things we're very keen to do is we've, in the last year or so, we've opened a customer contact centre. So what we want to do is if someone rings us up about, say, their council tax bill, we also know that they contacted us about something else last week. And it sounds really basic because if you ring up a lot of private companies, you know, they already know that. They have that single view of you. We haven't yet, and that's still something that we're trying to move towards. Now, it was quite nice actually to see that fewer people worry about us than Google. But actually, I think genuinely...
They don't live in Camden.
No, they don't. Yeah, exactly. So what do they care? Yeah. That's a very good point. But actually, I think that if we can get that type of information, we can genuinely provide better services. That's particularly true for businesses. Sorry, I'll just be brief. But to set up a restaurant in Camden, you need to contact about 17 separate services. And so that imposes an enormous startup cost. If we can integrate that process and mean you only have to contact us once, you only have to talk to one person who can then make everything else happen without you as the business person having to worry about it, that's going to make your life easier.
I'm going to have to wrap this now because we're into the last few minutes. I'm going to give each of the panellists between 30 and 40 seconds, so we'll be out here at 5 o'clock because we've changed a changeover for the next speaker. And if you can address any of the points that were made, that will also be very helpful, or a point you're burning to make. So we'll start with you, Tom.
Okay, I'm going to use my 30 seconds to follow up on Chris's point that it's absolutely right, that when it comes to use of data, it's about expectations, and it's about expectations around consent. You know, did I give my consent to use my data to my local council? In that case, yes, I probably expect for those certain services. Where we've seen people like Facebook, organisations like Facebook come unstuck is where people are doing stuff that exceeds or goes beyond people's expectations about how their data is used.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the start of a journey for us. So some of these issues and some of this discussion today has been absolutely fascinating. I think that there are some of these issues which we're still grappling with, and we will need help to get to the bottom of them. And some of that help might be from elsewhere in the public sector. Some of it might be from the private sector. So actually, if anyone can help us, please do.
World Economic Forum published a report earlier this year which said that the average person needs to spend 250 hours a year reading privacy statements of websites they visit. Okay, so 30 days, working days, 8 hours a day, you need to spend 30 days reading privacy policies of websites. So clearly, the whole system is broken. There is no sense that consumers are giving permission in ways they mean for data to be used in ways they need or want. However, we're in a data revolution, and if data and big data is used appropriately, it will make money for some people, maybe. It'll make the world a better place by giving social engagement to people who don't have it, by giving improved services, it'll create a new world. It'll happen whether you want it or not. King Canute did get washed away by the tide. I think we have an opportunity to shape it.
Birgitte.
Well, we often hear how the data in the world is doubling every 2 years, and this is literally a huge experimental growth. I think what's very important is that we allow a lot of experimentation and test beds around really understanding business models, understand the value in which we can be creating, etc., and really understand how we can use big data to generate growth. And I think that's what companies and users and consumers actually should be volunteering to be involved in, because then that's the best kind of interactive learning, of the best way in which we can set up proper open innovation within the economy. So I think that's one thing. But we then finally found something useful, and we are implementing new business models to reduce waste, to increase productivity, etc. I completely agree with the lady mentioning that we don't need more exceptions, limitations. I'm very happy that the government puts forward exception limitations more to copyrights and flexible patents. But I do think that we do need a proper IP manifesto that actually is not based upon that, but that's actually opening up a real space in which we can really interact and really create the value from the big data.
Roger.
Yeah, picking up on the data usage idea, and we've talked about regulation, we've talked about the difficulties of consent. Well, what are the alternatives? And one of the ideas that I've been toying with for a number of years now is picking up on a comment that came from a person in the far distance at the back of the room and translating the Creative Commons ideas into a privacy commons, so that you have a series of predefined, non-statutory, agreed by the community approaches to the use of data, which can be modified and adapted through time as we learn things, but which aren't going to be a statutory framework which is cast in stone. And it does seem as though within this big data environment, something which provides those constraints and parameters, such as a privacy commons, maybe something we ought to be looking at.
A privacy commons, nice idea. And we finish off with Daniel. Last word.
I'm just going to try and tie the three things together. One is big data, open innovation, and value. I think there's a large amount of misunderstanding about what big data is. I'm sure every single one of you have different definitions. The best one I've ever found is more data than you can store or process on one machine. That's it. And it very often gets confused with visualization and data scientists and things like this. If you think of big data as being three-phased, one is aggregating the data. The second phase is extracting insights from the data, patterns from the data, and the third phase is then making actions based on those insights. I think as we go up that stack, the more complicated things get, and the more that we have to access the open innovation community to help address some of those questions. And it's not until you answer those last questions, the action part, that will be driving real value from big data.
Okay, well, look, I'm going to wrap this. I think the idea of a privacy commons, I think the notion of being included in unless you're opting out, the notion that actually bigger is more anonymous than smaller are all kind of illuminating. I think that I also think that there's an amazing value here. And actually, one way or another, I think we have to privacy commons via and common law. That sounds the way we did it in the past. Let's not do it over millennium. But actually, let's do it. Thank you very much, everybody. And a round of applause to our panelists.